Just a spoonful of Tina's comedy helps the uncomfortability of discussing disability go down. Tina Friml, who lives with cerebral palsy, is a talented comedian who doesn't avoid the subject of disability. Rather, she dives right in, using humor to harness otherwise hard to talk about topics. She calls it like she sees it, with a delivery about disability that doesn't disappoint.
Thank you so much, Tina Friml, for joining us here on AwareNow. Appreciate you taking the time to share this space with us.
Of course. Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. So let's begin this way. Not totally committed to the lifestyle, in your Comedy Central stand-up feature, you share, "I'm like the bisexuality of ability." Love this, first of all. And second of all, for our readers and listeners, please share more about what you mean here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, calling it, the bisexuality of ability is a little bit simplistic and crude, but when I wrote that joke, it was kind of coming from a place that I've been in all my life, a limbo, where I have cerebral palsy, and also I'm fortunate enough to have a very mild case of it, in that I'm only affected in my mouth and my hands and a little bit balanced, and therefore I've always felt that I was a little bit in limbo. I didn't quite completely relate to much of the disability community, in that, I didn't quite have the same needs for accommodations, and I personally was self-conscious that I wasn't disabled enough. and therefore it kind of held me back from seeking out friends within the disability community, and so therefore I was always kind of in limbo, between being disabled and being not disabled, and that was going on inside. But even on the outside, having a mild physical outward disability, it really affected kind of how people were perceiving me, especially in my early 20s. I got mistaken for everything you could ever imagine. Like, people would think I'd been drinking or on drugs, or I would be walking down the street and someone would come up and say, "You look really tired, wink wink," or just one time I was at a crosswalk light, and this guy with long dreads came up to me and said, "Hey, soul sister, you good? You good?" And I said, "Oh, I'm good. And I think it's just kind of, it's always been, just a weird place to be in terms of perception in such a world that people feel safe in the black and white. To be a little bit in the gray area and show that disability is, like everything else, a spectrum. That's kind of where I try and describe it in comedy, and the simplest way I could was the bisexuality of ability.
Well, you did a beautiful job with it, and right away it hit home just so quickly and makes sense. Got it. So in your words, these are your words, comedy became a cool thing. Then it became a hobby. Then it became my life. So, in more words of your own, Tina, please share, what is it about comedy that made you commit your life to it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, before I began comedy, I've always been a performer and creative. And growing up, I grew up quite literally in theater, in a theater. My mom worked in a theater box office for 15 years. And my father is a set designer for an opera company. And so growing up, kind of, I at first I wanted to be an actor, and then a little bit later I got really into music and I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. But both of these other creative ventures, it was an upward battle. And I was really held back by what I now understand as this unspoken kind of just, there was a lot to be said about the condition that I had and the situation I was in. And because when you speak on disability without sugarcoating it with comedy, because comedy really is a spoonful of sugar, it makes people very uncomfortable because it's not only a heavy topic, but it's, in my opinion, almost taboo to talk about a disability. It's such a universally sensitive, tragic phenomenon in the world to a lot of people. And I was just one of them. I could sense that. And so because I had this unspoken, very prevalent difference about me, it came out in a lot of the other creative ventures. I was trying to be an actor and a musician, and I never quite could feel supported or feel like I was good enough. I found comedy accidentally. I attended a stand-up comedy course, a 6-week course. I paid $150 for it. And it quickly became the missing piece that I've been missing all my life. Not only in how it felt coming out and performing, but how I was receiving it. And I was able to really speak on my authentic, unfiltered experience as a disabled woman. And I would say about a year in, the snowball effect of it was rolling so fast that I quickly, I became such a different, more free person than I had been a year before, the day before I began comedy. So it was when I realized that I could never really go back to the person that I was before I began comedy, that I really realized that this was it. I really often compare it to falling in love with someone, where there's a little bit of dating, there's a little bit of the dance, and then suddenly it just hits you that they are the one.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I felt like. Here it is. this is exactly where I was meant to be.
That is awesome. Comedy was the one. So not only do you entertain on the stage, you educate as well just by telling it like it is. In the spotlight, you addressed incorrect assumptions about CP, about disability. Was it always from the start? Was it always your intention to both entertain and educate?
No, which is so funny. The education part came accidentally. It came completely authentically. And I think the education just comes from sharing my experience. And with my experience comes sharing exactly from my point of view. And oftentimes when I get up on stage, I love to turn the mirror back on the audience and really, really genuinely show them what the kinds of things I see and I hear from people's reactions about seeing a real life disabled person in the world. And on top of that, one of my favorite reactions to any kind of joke that I have or a bit that I have, every now and then I'll read a comment or I'll talk to an audience member after a show, and they'll touch upon some element of my experience that I speak on in my comedy, and they'll say, that never even occurred to me that would be something you would deal with. That's music to my ears. I think that educating people is simply just really sharing with them exactly how it is. Because people are smart and you don't have to explain why it hurt to hear this, or what makes this so ironic or inconvenient. People, I often in my comedy, I share exactly my experience, and I leave out the commentary about why you should never say that to someone, or how as a society we can better adapt to this kind of accommodation or that kind of way of thinking that's false. I kind of leave that up to the audience to interpret that. And to be honest, I think that up to interpretation element is what a lot of people love about what I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you share what you do authentically as you do, it makes it really clear, to your point. Oh, I never thought of that. Oh, I never looked at it that way. You're giving people a whole new lens to look at life through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and I think naturally I get that from my own experience watching an incredible documentary or a film or other comics that have a very distinguished experience that I would never otherwise really know. That really kind of eye-opening light bulb moment that you get, that's so, I mean, I get a lot of pleasure whenever my perspective, I can feel it opening up based on just even like a 2-minute clip that I watch. That growth, I adore that feeling. So I think that's kind of what I try and give to people while they're laughing, of course.
Right, while they're laughing.
They'll never know. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I distract them over here.
Yes. It's the bait and switch. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. They'll never even learn it. They'll never even know that they're learning.
We'll keep it a secret.
Yeah.
So we talked a moment ago about the comfort or non-comfort, as it is. Conversations about disability can often be very uncomfortable. So do you feel then that comedy is, for you, it seemed to be the answer, the tool that makes addressing disability more comfortable? Or has comedy been, has it been uncomfortable sometimes, or is it always just so much more comfortable, do you find?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, like I spoke a bit earlier, it really is a spoonful of sugar for the medicine, and well, that song's about to be stuck in my head and your head, and the heads of everyone watching this right now. But I about a year before I got into comedy, I was in my final year of college, and I took an elective English course in memoir writing. And I will, I distinctly remember my professor one day telling us while we were trying to pick the topic in our life that we wanted to write a mini memoir about. And we were kind of examining all the different elements of our life, of our personal life. And I remember that she said, keep in mind, when you're thinking about this, that one thing in your mind, that thing that like you really don't want to get into, you don't want to write about, like that thing, that's what you have to write about. And that stuck with me so much, because that was what brought me to actually write a memoir about my disabled experience that I'd never written before. I kept it all inside, just because it made people so uncomfortable. I learned from an early age, don't even get into it, because people will change the subject, they'll shut down, they'll distract themselves, and just to not have that conversation. I wrote this little memoir in this class, and it was great, and people loved it, and I got a good grade. But I remember reading it back and realizing that it read like a tragedy. And that really hit me, because I'm not a tragedy. I'm just me. And comedy was really the answer to that for me. It really is the perfect tool to show people that, yes, there is so much about disability that's incredibly unfair and unfortunate. And yet, at the end of the day, we're still people, and we have so much joy and so much creativity in life. And a disabled life is not a stolen life. It's still a life, just with an element to it that perhaps a lot of people cannot even imagine. I think that's the ultimate goal in my comedy, even more than, making people laugh, and even more than even educating people, is just showcasing, a disabled person happy and a disabled person with style and with kind of a lust for life. And that is really authentic to who I am.
Well, it's just, again, what you're doing, how you're doing it, I think it's going to wake a lot of people up and make a lot of people feel more comfortable in themselves, disabled or not. So comedy is, to your point, again, is all about making a heavy topic feel light. So that said, how do you manage that line between keeping things light while also not trivializing the heavy issues regarding disability?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually the hardest thing that I struggle with. There are a lot of elements that I touch upon in my longer set, which are really, really heavy. I have a whole part of my show where I go into how I became disabled, my traumatic birth, and when I was writing that bit and workshopping it, that was perhaps one of the trickiest, most terrifying stories to workshop, because my God, like traumatic birth is just so on the opposite end of anything that could ever be funny. And that made it a challenge. that made me determined, because again, much like my professor said, that one thing that you never don't go there, that as a writer, that is where you go. That's exactly where you go. And I just, when I began comedy, that traumatic birth story that I had, that was something that for a long time I would never joke about. I don't like to think about all this stuff. And so that pushed me to what do I want to say about it? What is there to talk about with it? What is there I could even make funny about it? And I know that it was when I began kind of beginning to put that bit in my show. I did that bit for a cerebral palsy conference, which that's a thing. I didn't even know that was a thing until comedy. And I did that bit and I was so nervous. That even if the jokes were good and I was treading lightly, I was walking that line about it, but I was still so nervous that people would not be okay, even with the fact I'm mentioning traumatic birth within a comedy set. And I remember after a woman coming up to me and saying, "My son had a traumatic birth, and I never in a million years thought I would ever laugh at traumatic birth, but you just made me laugh so hard." And that was the reassurance I needed, not only for that bit, but just to continue to walk that line. And throughout my whole set, I really go back and forth. There are parts of my show that are very heavy, and in my eyes, I want that to be the case, even in a comedy show, because I think so is life. is this constant flux of the heavy moments and the moments that just take the air out of your lungs, and then suddenly something happens or someone says something that just makes you burst out laughing, and there's an irony to it. So walking that line, it's definitely tricky business, and it's something I'm constantly aware of and challenged by. And yet, I think if I were to ever play it safe, and that would kind of go against why I do what I do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for walking that line and walking it so well. I love that you just took the challenge, you recognized the challenge, and you didn't choose to play it safe. You took it on. And so let's close this way. There's a big difference, of course, between laughing with someone and laughing at someone. The latter, of course, not being comfortable unless you're a comedian. When the audience laughs at you, it feels good, of course. But for those who are not on a stage, those who are not trying to entertain, for those who are laughed at because of a difference they have or a dream that they hold, what advice do you have for dealing with the haters? How do we do that?
It's so funny too, because every now and then I'll get a comment on a video that I post online that will be from a hater. and it will be just some guy that and it's always super awkwardly worded. It's them being like, "Oh, I'm laughing, but not at her jokes." Like, I'm laughing at because she's disabled. Some kind of iteration of that, and it's so odd because, I mean, at this point in my career, they can laugh at me. Like, it really doesn't matter. I'm there to make people laugh, and I don't know, maybe it's just a very dumbed down way of looking at it, but because I'm getting people to laugh, I'm so much less affected than I used to be at the idea of people laughing at me because I'm disabled. I think ultimately that's kind of, it is where I grew my sense of humor, was in school being bullied, and having people kind of laughing at me, and what kind of clicked in my head was, well, if people are looking at me, I might as well do a trick. Like, I might as well say something funny, and it was admittedly maybe also a little bit of self, self-security of, well, if I say a joke, I guess I don't really know whether or not they're laughing at me or with me.
Right.
Ultimately, I think if I could give kind of advice to anyone looking to pursue a dream with the fear that they're being laughed at, I think, it's never going to not affect you. I'm actually not a believer in the simple, like, oh, ignore them. Let it roll off your shoulders. We're people, we can't do that. We care about other people, what other people will think of us. It's just kind of ingrained with us. But I think what I began to develop is the outlook that I began to develop in comedy was, well, if they're laughing at you, that means they're looking at you. That means they're paying attention. And I would so much rather that than the opposite, than to be looked over, to be unseen. And it really kind of is, as much as I hate to put it like this, it really is a little bit like any attention is good attention. Like a kid, like a toddler, But there's so many ways that I think you can take someone's attention, whether it's negative or positive, and the only control that you have over what someone thinks of you is what you do with the attention that they're giving you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they are giving you a gift in the moment. And so with that, do what you do best and make the most of the platform that they're giving you in the moment.
And I love that point. I love that point of, if they're laughing at you, that means that they're looking at you. You have something of theirs. You have their attention. And then the question becomes, as you just said, what will you do with it? Yes. Right? It's always how you react to it. So,
and in the world, more and more these days, having a person's attention, that is huge. There's so many things in the world competing for all of our attention. And, I mean, every time I get someone commenting on a video, just, a hater, just saying, oh, it's just pity laughs, or, well, I don't get it. They took the time to comment that and to think about that. It's huge.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, again, whether positive or negative, the feedback is that you're getting feedback. Like, you took their attention, and so to affect someone one way or another, just to know that you did that, you are not, that you are seen, that you are heard. I have to say, I'm very thankful today for having had the opportunity, the pleasure of hearing you and hearing your story and sharing as authentically and beautifully as you have. So glad we found you. So glad we had this time, and just keep rocking it like you do. And thank you so much for helping all of us become a bit more aware now.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure to talk to you and to ramble away.
Love your ramblings. Thank you.